Hi there, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the Panasonic FZ2500, the 1-inch sensor bridge camera. Let's get started. The Panasonic FZ2500 is a bridge camera with a 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor and a 20 times zoom, which is an equivalent to a 24 to 480 millimeter lens. It has a fully articulating touch LCD screen, has a continuous drive of 12 frames per second, and shoots 4K video up to 30 frames. This camera has a microphone and headphone port, has Wi-Fi to transfer images, and has a built-in ND filter feature, making this a great video camera. Today we will be going over the buttons, doors, and menus to help you find your way around this camera. Okay, so going over this camera today, this is probably Panasonic's most high-end bridge camera. So it has a lot more features. It has a lot of video features. So just by looking at the lens here, we can see that it does have an aperture of 2.8 to 4.5, which is pretty nice. Of course, it has the 1-inch sensor, which is good. On the side of the lens here, we can see that it does have an ND filter built-in option, which is really cool, especially for video, where you do have like an automatic setting versus certain stops. You do have function buttons here, which are all going to be programmable in the menu. The function buttons are customizable, so if you wanted to have easy access to one specific setting, you could program it to any of these buttons for that to work. And then going to the side of the camera here, we do have a few doors. So here we have the mic door, so you just open that up. That's where you would plug an external mic in. Now the built-in mic, of course, is going to be right here, which is not too bad in regards to built-in mics on cameras. We do have the headphone port here. We also have inside here the HDMI and the USB port. The USB port is going to be used for transferring images to your computer, upgrading firmware if there is any, and then of course you have your HDMI port here as well if you wanted to hook this up to a television, show pictures that you've taken to a group of people, that way they're not gather around your camera, you know, that sort of thing. And then on the other side here, we can see that we have our memory card door. This is where you're going to have your one memory card slot, which is spring-loaded, so do keep that in mind. Don't try and pry it out with your fingers, it will break. There is a little symbol here that does show which direction the card is supposed to go in, so do keep that in mind. We do have a remote control port here as well for a shutter release to do long exposure photography, group photography, that sort of thing if you just want to use an external remote. At the bottom of the camera here, we do have our battery door here, and just to take that out, you just hit this little switch, it pops right out. You're able to take the battery out accordingly. Going to the top of the camera here, starting with this dial, this is going to be our drive dial. The single square is going to be a single shot, so if we click and hold the shutter button down, it's going to take one picture, versus if we have it on the continuous boxes here, that's where it's going to take advantage of that continuous drive at 12 frames per second. So if we click and hold the shutter button down, it'll continually take pictures as you're trying to capture motion or whatever you're trying to do there. The 4K burst mode is going to allow you to take pictures at 30 frames per second versus the 12 on the regular continuous drive. And what that does is it takes a 4K clip at 30 frames and allows you to pick certain frames in the 4K clip that it took to save them as individual pictures, which is kind of cool. The reason that I like the 4K burst mode over the regular continuous drive is because the continuous drive, if you did a continuous shot for 1 second and it took 12 pictures, you'd have to pick out 1 or 2 that you like, and then you have to go through and delete all the other ones that you don't like. Versus the 4K photo burst mode, you can actually pick 1 out of the 30 that you took in the 1 second and save that as an image, and then just delete the burst mode file. And that way it's just an easier step. We also have, getting a little bit closer look here, the mountains and flower with the multiple frames here. That's your post focus mode. What that mode does is it allows you to take a picture, preferably of something that's not moving. And what it does is it takes several frames and kind of combines them and then allows you to pick a focus point after the fact. So it's kind of a neat little thing to use, especially if you're doing close-up images like flowers, that sort of thing. And then of course we have a couple of timer or time-lapse modes here as well. Of course we went over how this is our built-in microphone. This is going to be our hot shoe or cold shoe depending on how you use it. You can mount your external mic here underneath the little cover. Otherwise you can use an external flash that is made for Panasonic and use that as well. As you know, when it comes to the pop-up flash, those aren't always the best. We do have our mode dial here along with our power button. Now if we turn our power button on, now see how closed up this is. When we turn it on, it does extend out quite a bit, almost too large for my frame. So do keep in mind that when the camera's on, this is the smallest it's going to get. So on the mode dial here, we are going to go ahead and start in our IA mode. The IA is going to be Intelligent Auto. Now this mode and A mode are very commonly misconstrued because a lot of people just see the big A and they go, oh, that's automatic, because there's not like a big green sign to show that that's the automatic mode. But it's actually going to be the IA. Intelligent Auto is going to allow the camera to determine what the situation is. So if it determines a person is in the photo, it's going to kick into portrait mode. If you're really close to a subject, it's going to kick into macro mode, that type of thing. So it's actually very, very smart for what it does. However, whenever you take pictures in the automatic mode, sometimes, you know, the picture doesn't come out exactly the way you want it to. It comes out the way the camera wants it to. So that's why we have the P, the A, the S, and the M modes here. So what this is the P mode is going to be our program mode. This is your first step out of automatic. It's going to allow you to use the automatic preference of the camera, but change certain settings to make it a little bit more customizable. So when you start learning about your shutter speed, your apertures, your focus points, your metering, and all of those things that make a photograph, P mode is an excellent mode to start in. If you want to learn more about your P, A, and S modes, you can go ahead and check out my Camera Basics playlist, and I kind of go over those in separate videos. But the A mode here is going to be your aperture priority. That's the opening in the lens, how much light you're letting in. It also controls depth of field, that nice blurry background, sharp foreground. So you would typically use this in low light situations, or if you want that blurry background, sharp foreground, or sharpness throughout the image. Otherwise, we have our S mode, which is our shutter speed mode. This is going to control how fast the camera takes the picture. So it captures speed or it shows motion. So if you wanted to, you know, take a picture of, you know, a family member playing baseball at that right moment where the bat just hits the ball, or if you wanted to, say, slow down your shutter speed to get that nice blurred water over the waterfall look, that's how you would accomplish that. M is going to be full-on manual, meaning you have all the control over the camera. The camera doesn't really assist you at all. So, you know, you may not find that you use this mode very much at all, especially in the beginning if you're using this camera. But it's a good way to, if you're taking a picture in S, A, or P mode, get a starting point and adjust from there in manual mode where you do have more control. Where you have the most control, really. Then we have our movie mode. Okay, it's a little video camera with the M. Now keep in mind on M, S, A, P, and Auto, you can also record video. All you have to do is hit the big red button. You hit that once to start recording, hit it again to stop recording. Pretty simple. The reason that they have a movie mode is because it actually gives you direct video features. So, you know, if you want to see the mic levels on the screen, that type of thing, that would all be found in the movie mode. You have your custom mode, so if you wanted to set certain settings to, you know, for example, how I do my YouTube once a week. I always use the same lighting, always use the same matte, and typically most of the cameras are black. So if I found the perfect setting, what I could do is I could put it to the custom mode, and if I go out and I take pictures of my friend, or I go out and I get hired for a shoot, then what I would do is I would just have to come back to custom mode when I come back and do more YouTube stuff, and it's back to the settings that I wanted in the first place, which is kind of a cool little option. Here we have the panoramic mode, where you would move your camera left to right in a nice steady smooth motion to get a wide establishing shot of like a landscape, that type of thing. We have our scene modes here. So if we go ahead, I'm going to flip this articulating screen out. We're going to flip it on around. There we go. So our scene modes are going to be automatic, but it's going to allow you to tell the camera, instead of it guessing on Intelligent Auto, exactly what the situation is. So you have different portrait modes, you have different scenery modes, sunset modes, glistening water, you have, you know, night shots, soft image of a flower, appetizing food, animals, sports, all sorts of different options here that you can choose from on the scene mode. And then, of course, the last but not least, on this little painter's palette here, we do have our kind of like our artistic mode. So this just gives you different different filters, you know, to put to give you different looks. So there's different black and white modes here, but my personal favorite to play with is going to be the 1-point color. This allows you to select one specific color out of your scene, and it's going to make the rest of the scene black and white, which is kind of neat. So just kind of something creative to play with, especially if you're not familiar with Photoshop, where you can also do that yourself. It's something that you can do in camera, which is kind of cool. And then for the rest of the video, I'm going to go ahead and stick to the P mode, because you'll find that on the Intelligent Auto mode, it doesn't display all of the menu options. So if you are confused when I go through the menu, that you're not seeing certain things, make sure you're dialed into your P mode for that if you're following along. We do have another function button 4, which at the moment is going to be your exposure compensation button. So if we hit that button, it's going to open up this guy down here, and if we adjust it, if we adjust it backward, we're going to go and get a darker scene, versus if we go to the pluses, we're going to get a brighter screen. So it allows you to get a brighter or darker scene without changing any major settings. So if you're trying to compensate for a dog with white fur or black rocks on a beach, then you have that available. And of course, we have our adjustment knobs here and here to adjust certain settings. We have our shutter button here, which if you push halfway down, you'll hear that nice chirp, and you push it all the way down to take a picture. And then, of course, we have our zoom ability here. As you can see, it's a 24 to 480 equivalent when it comes to lenses. So you'll find that if you put it toward the W, it's actually going to be wide angle. If you hold it toward the T, that's going to be telephoto. And what's so great about this camera is, even though the lens is extended here, if you do telephoto, the lens doesn't extend any more than what it is currently. It's all going to extend within the barrel here. So at least it's not going to go any further out. Now if we go to the back of the camera here. So here we have a function 7 button. So this is programmable, but out of the box it's going to control your LVF live viewfinder. That's going to be this guy here. So you'll see that if I bring my face up close to the viewfinder, it's actually going to turn that viewfinder on, versus if I am away from the viewfinder, it's going to turn the screen on. So that's on automatic at the moment. If I hit it once, it's going to go just to the viewfinder. Okay. If I hit it again, it's going to go just to the screen. This switch here is going to control our autofocus modes. Now this is of course only changeable in your manual modes. It is not available in your auto mode. But you have AFS, AFC, AFF, and manual focus. AFS is going to be autofocus single. This is going to allow you to focus on a single subject that's not moving, static. It's going to focus and it's going to lock on. AFC is autofocus continuous. This is where the camera is going to continually focus as the subject moves and move its focus accordingly. AFF is going to be autofocus flexible, you know, like autofocus auto, what your automatic mode does, where the camera determines if it's AFS or AFC for you. Now, of course, cameras aren't perfect. We're smarter than the camera. Keep that in mind. So sometimes the camera is not correct, and sometimes it doesn't pick up on movement, or sometimes it picks up on movement that really should just be still. Then, of course, we have manual focus, which will allow you to use this front ring here to manual focus. You can also zoom with this ring here as well as the lever, by the way. The function 5 button is going to be our quick menu button. So if we hit this, it's going to allow us to change everything that we see here on the screen. So if we start up at the top there, this is going to be it's very similar to filters, but it just changes the color itself. So you got like vivid color, natural color, monochrome, that type of thing. But honestly, I would just keep it on standard for the most part. You have your flash mode here. If you wanted to adjust your flash, which, by the way, I totally missed this switch here. You have a switch here, and that's going to pop up the flash for you. It's a little hidden. It's by the viewfinder. Okay, continuing. If you wanted force flash on, if you want red eye flash, that type of thing, that's where you're going to adjust that. But of course, the flash will not pop up on its own. You do have to hit that little switch. This is going to be your video settings here, which I like to shoot on 1080p at 60 frames. That's just a good mode to be on for me, usually. But it does do 4K video up to 30 frames on this camera. You can choose the ratio size for your picture, which is kind of neat. 3:2 or 4:3 is going to be the most common. You can choose what quality of photo that you would like. So you can do RAW, you can do RAW and JPEG, or just JPEG. Personally, me, I like to shoot in RAW because I like the ability to make the most out of my images. So you'll notice here that here's the AFS and AFF again, because you'll see on the switch here how it says AFS/AFF, which means you have a choice. In the quick menu is where you're going to decide if you want to decide the AFS or if you want the camera to decide on the AFF. So you're going to be your autofocus area. So this is where it's going to autofocus. You can choose face and eye detection if you're taking pictures of people. You can do tracking for movement. You can do all the 49-point area there for it to kind of be a front priority spot. Just a general zone, one specific area versus a very specific spot. So it kind of goes from this one here, where you kind of have the whole screen to work with and it's just grabbing focus where it wants, to going to very specific, like the eyeball. So it really just depends on what you want to, how much you want to direct focus. Then we have our metering here, where it's taking the light from. So the first one here is going to be multimetering, where it's going to actually consider the entire image and find a nice balance of light between everything, which can kind of muddy things up sometimes. Center weighted, which is what I have my camera on right now, because you'll see that it's considering the light of the screen, it's making everything darker. It's going to take whatever's in the center. So if I move the black color of the camera to the center, see how everything makes brighter. So keep that in mind. Ooh. And then you have spot metering as well. So if I wanted to really teach from the side here and consider the lighting, that's what it would do. And then we are back to our exposure compensation, which you can also do from the button on the top. We have your ISO, which is your it's your image sensitivity to light. So keep that in mind to play with. And then we have your white balance, which auto white balance does a pretty good job on its own, finding that nice mid gray tone, making whites true white. Otherwise, there are presets, or you can choose your own custom temperature to make it a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler accordingly. And everything there on your quick menu, I mean, that's everything you should have to change. You should very rarely have to go into your actual menu, so keep that in mind. We have our playback button here, which of course I don't have any pictures on this card specifically, but we can go backward and forward through pictures that we've taken. And then if you want to delete any of those pictures, you can use the FN6 button on there, and it's going to ask if you would like to delete those pictures as well. The FN6 button on the shooting mode is actually just going to show you a different effect. Then we have the display mode here, which just changes the display of your screen. So you would just kind of keep clicking it until you're happy with the outcome here. Personally, I like this one. So even though it does seem a little busy on top, it does give me the battery level, it tells me how many pictures I have left, that type of thing. But you can choose one with a level or something like that. And then we have some shortcut buttons here. So if we hit up, it instantly brings up our ISO. If we go to the right, it's going to bring up our white balance. If we go to the left here, it's going to be our autofocus area. And if we go down, it's actually going to allow us to dial into our macro mode if you do want to tell it to really getting close to images, like a bug on a flower, that type of thing. So these three buttons are all accessible through the quick menu, but this one's pretty unique, so do keep that one in mind. The menu set button. So we're going to go ahead and go through the menu here, get into the fun part. So one thing about the menu is a lot of things in the menu are laid out on the camera in your quick menu and your shortcuts. So I may skip over quite a bit of this for that reason, and then for another reason I may skip it because it's not used enough to explain. So if you do have a specific question of something that I do not go through on the camera, please let me know in the comments below. I will get back to you. I'm always happy to answer questions that you have, or if I don't explain anything, if I don't explain something in enough detail, give me a heads up. Alright, so starting on the first tab here, this is our camera tab or shooting tab for pictures specifically. You see on the side here we have different pages, 1 through 7. So we have photo style, again, that's quick menu, your filter settings, aspect ratio. This is all going to be quick menu stuff here, stuff that we have already gone over. You have your self timer, again, that's this dial here, time lapse or animation, eye dynamic, eye resolution, HDR. I mean, all those I would personally keep off, but I also like to edit my images on a editing program, so that's totally preference. Your shutter type, if you want to shoot on manual shutter versus electronic shutter, your flash settings, red eye removal, your ISO limit set, which I highly recommend if you are just getting started with this camera, you're starting to learn your ISO, your shutter speed, your aperture. I would put your ISO on auto, but I would also set the limit to 3200. That way you're giving the camera the ability to move from bright outside to dark indoors and be able to help you out, but having a little bit of control. You have ISO increments, long shutter noise reduction. I mean, a lot of these you're just never going to play with. Color space, keep that on sRGB. Your stabilizer, so that is mainly going to kick in when you're doing video, but does have optical stabilization as well. Has face recognition, profile setup, and that pretty much sums up the camera tab there. The next one here is specifically for video, which on this camera is going to be very similar to the shooting menu. It's just, you know, for video. So you have the photo style, the filter settings, all of that on there still. Your quality, so instead of JPEG versus RAW, you have, if you want an MP4 and how many, you know, HD versus 4K and how many frames. You know, you have your autofocus settings, all the same there, level shot, metering mode, all pretty much the same stuff. Yeah, flicker decrease, which helps in fluorescent lighting. Sound output, mic level display, mic level adjustment, mic level limiter, wind noise canceller, which is really nice, zoom mic. If you're not really into video, you just like doing the occasional clip, don't worry about any of these guys. Then of course we have the wrench with the C. This is going to be our custom settings, okay? You have a custom set memory, so that's going to be the C part of the dial up here. You have silent mode. Now keep in mind, if you put it into silent mode, it turns off a lot of features. You can't use the flash, you can't use continuous drive, I believe. It really limits to what you can use on silent mode, so keep that in mind. You have your autofocus, auto exposure lock, which is actually this button here, which I did miss. This is going to allow you to lock in your autofocus or lock in the lighting, that's your exposure, to what you're specifically pointed at. So you can actually tell this button specifically if you want it to be the auto exposure lock or the autofocus lock. You have shutter autofocus, which is what we want. Half press release, don't recommend it. A lot of people get frustrated with this. Quick autofocus, autofocus assistant lamp. So there's a little LED up here that'll shine out if it needs assistance autofocusing on a specific area, if it's too dark or there's not enough detail. We have focus release priority, autofocus and manual focus guide, peaking, histogram. All of these are customizable if you want to see them, if you don't want to see them, if you want to change things. It's all really going to be preference at that point. Constant preview. You have a live viewfinder display, like how you want it to display your settings, same as the monitor. Your record area, auto review. So like that's going to display pictures that you've just taken for a certain amount of time, and you can adjust that time. Function button set, if you want to change any of these function buttons and what they do, you can do that. Your zoom lever, your zoom ring, you can change all of these things on your camera to do exactly what you want it to. So it's highly customizable, which is really cool. Then we have our just general settings here. We have the online manual, we have the clock setup, the world time, travel date if you plan on traveling, which, you might not be right now, but if you do plan on traveling after we get through all of this in 2020, you can set a travel date so it considers that time change for you. Your Wi-Fi, so you can connect it to your phone to either use your phone as a remote control, or you can actually transfer images from the camera to your phone itself. The beep, headphone volume, live view mode, monitor display, monitor luminance, so the brightness of it, economy mode, USB mode, TV connection, all of these here. You have your language, version display, which allows you to check your firmware version, exposure compensation reset. I would almost want that on because sometimes I forget that I accidentally changed the exposure. You have your number reset, which allows you to reset your file number when you take pictures. You have your general reset button. So if you start playing with these settings that we're going through here and you change something and you don't know what you changed and your camera's doing something funny now, what you can do is go and just hit reset. And that's just going to reset the camera to factory settings, and that should fix your problem. You can reset Wi-Fi settings, change the system frequency, and then you got format, which is extremely important to know, and I always take time out of every walkthrough to go through this setting. So format is important to know because, one, you don't want to find it on accident, and two, it's something that you want to do every now and then. And I'll tell you why. So formatting is going to permanently erase everything on your card, all data, and help you start fresh. And the reason you would want to do that is because it clears out your card, it keeps it nice and healthy, and it keeps it last long, and it will last a lot longer. The reason you want to do that instead of using your trash can button is because when you use your trash can button, it deletes the visible file but keeps the data. So when you're just overwriting that file over and over again, that can cause corruption, it can lock you out of your card, and then you've lost your future images. So we don't want that to happen. So if you're the type of person that will reuse your card instead of going and buying a new one, what you want to do is after you've used it, you've put it on your computer, you've made sure it's backed up. I cannot stress this enough. Make sure the pictures are backed up off the card, at least if you care about them. And then when you put in your computer, in your camera, when you put in your camera and you want to start fresh, you're going to a new job, you're going to a new shoot, or you're going on a new trip, you want to go in, you want to format your card, and it'll give you a nice little warning there. So it'll tell you, are you sure it's going to delete all data from the memory card? And you'll hit yes at that point, and it'll format it for you. And then the last tab here is our playback tab here. So you can do a slideshow. This is all going to be in regards to pictures you've already taken. You can log the location. You can do raw processing in camera. You can do light composition, clear retouching, add a text stamp. do time-lapse video, do stop motion video, resize, crop, rotate, all of these fun little things here, which are really, really neat. And that pretty much sums up this camera. Personally, I think it's probably going to be the most advanced out of the Lumix Bridge line. So from most basic to more advanced, you have the FZ80, you have the FZ300, which are both going to be half-inch sensors. Then you have the FZ1000 Mark II, and then you have the FZ2500, which is going to be above all of them. This guy is a great camera, especially if you plan on doing a little bit of video and a little bit of pictures, and you just want something that's all-in-one, that gives you something decent, something better than your phone, something that gives you good quality, but you know, you don't want to invest in something that has interchangeable lenses. You know, maybe you're not that far along yet. They call this a bridge camera for a reason. It's between a point and shoot and interchangeable lens, kind of in that stepping stone there. But it's a great camera. And you know, it has a good grip to it. It's not too heavy, and it's fairly durable as well. Now, if you guys have any questions about this camera, if you want to see a different camera in the walkthrough, put your request below and I'll be sure to get back to you. And until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.